Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. I'm joined with Mitch Hankins, who's the founder of the DeBug Life. And Mitch and I are going to have a lot to talk about today, just as far as cracking outside of the rules that society wants to establish for us and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Mitch, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I look forward to having a good chat with you.
So before we get started in our conversation, though, Mitch, just go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience in your own words. Who is Mitch today?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so I am Mitch Hankins. Like Dan said, I am the founder of the DeBug Life. The way that got started is essentially because I wanted to do more than just, your typical W-2 income. I wanted to really have a spiritual mission in life. So I started asking myself, well, what keeps me up at night? What do I really want to work on at the beginning of the day? And for me, that's really like looking within and finding out who I am as a person and acting on that. And I think I see a lot of people that I meet that are, including myself, we wear masks, whether we wear masks as mothers, as husbands, as men, as women, as anything really. And we've gotten so out of touch with who we are as a being that I think explains all the reasons that we're self-medicating with all sorts of drugs like alcohol and weed and all these different things. And I think once you really start living outside the norms of society and you embrace who you truly are as a person and you don't feel ashamed about it, I think that's really when you start feeling happy and fulfilled and being able to live presently in the moment. Um, and that's really what I'm focusing on. I'm a little bit of history. I was born and raised in the Netherlands. I lived there for the first 20 years of my life. My dad was in the U.S. Air Force. Got stationed over there. Met my mom. Stayed. Had kids. And then I went the other way. So I enlisted in the Air Force in Germany, actually, the U.S. Air Force at a base in Germany. And they flew me out to Texas. And from that point on, I kind of moved all over the U.S. I was an air traffic controller, and I learned a lot, but especially in that structure, I kind of learned like, well, maybe this really controlled, micromanaged environment isn't for me. And from there on out, I pursued a computer science degree. I at that point got hired by Nasdaq, and then I saw no reason to finish my degree again because it was very structured. So I dropped out of school. While working at Nasdaq in Denver, I had a friend whose company was looking for a developer, so I transitioned over to that company where I was able to work remotely, and I moved to San Diego. And that's really where I started developing myself spiritually and why I started asking myself, like, hey, why is it so easy for me to pick up all my gear and move up to the other side of the country? Why don't I have consistent, reliable friendships? Why don't I feel fulfilled? Why don't I have long-term relationships? What are all these things that are going wrong in my life? And since I've made that journey, I'm still in the process of that journey. That's something I really want to share with other people and elicit the same effect in other people. And that's really what the DeBug Life is all about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And again, coming from a guy who lives full time in an RV, a lot of what you're saying there resonates quite a bit. And it's funny. You talked about self-medicating and that sort of stuff, and we do live in a society that not only is self-medicating, um, big thing, but the medical, I'll call it industry,
That's what it is.
has they've got a pill for everything. If you're feeling sad, here's a pill. If your back hurts, here's a pill. If you have this ailment, here's a pill, as opposed to really looking at what is causing those issues to begin with.
Yep.
And really how our mind, body, and spirit all work together and coincide. And once we start neglecting one, the other two start to fail as well. So um, for you to kind of recognize at at some point there where you were tired of those rules that society has established for us. I mean, was there like a single aha moment for you, or was it just kind of a journey of self-awareness and connecting to your spirit more?
I would say for me, it was really a gradual compounding journey. There were certainly moments where I had so much aha moments where all those little things added up and kind of consolidated. But for example, I remember living by the beach in San Diego for a year, and this was right on the cliff. So, we could walk out the yard with our surfboards and just jump right in the ocean. And then I would think back to having to do meetings or having to do things or, just having to do certain things just to be able to eat, just to be able to pay the bills, just to be able to live in society. And that takes so much of the fun out of it. And that, really pulls me out of the moment. So like I have those sorts of core memories where I really think they were aha moments in the sense of, wow, I've learned all these things over time. And now it kind of comes together and makes me realize that it's very hard for me to live within the normal confines of society and being able to feel fulfilled. But it's very much been a struggle of trying to find the right people for me, trying to find the right habits for me, and especially failing. It hasn't been like a journey of success. It's been a failure of massive pain, of massive setbacks, and of massive hard work. And I think all of that just kind of comes together for me.
Yeah, I love that. And what part? You said you were born in the Netherlands, then you were in Germany for a while. You've been all over the U.S. Lived in 7 different states. How has taking in parts of all of those different cultures, affected that journey for you, and how you want to go ahead and live your life now?
Wow, that's an incredibly insightful question. I know that comes from experience from you having traveled around, but I would say a great deal. By far the biggest ones. Like I always tell people, if you feel stuck, if you feel stagnant, pack up your stuff for a week and go somewhere. Like don't stay in touch with anyone. Just go somewhere, go camp, go do something, and or even moving, because when you're in a different environment and you're outside that comfort zone, that's really when I think you're in you're in a place to really do discovery, and you're really in a place to let go of things that didn't serve you. For me, the biggest reason of leaving Europe is, a lot of people think it's like this. A lot of Americans have Europe pictured as like this idealistic, perfect healthcare, perfect this, perfect equality, all these things, countries. And yes, there's a lot of amazing benefits to Europe. But also, from my experience, it was very much look like a box, act like a box, talk like a box. And if you don't, then you're going to get looks. You're going to get a certain type of negative attention. And I think that always rubbed me the wrong way growing up. So I think I've always known, like, okay, I'm an unusual person. I want to do kind of my own thing. I don't really want to be told what to do. I want to live my own life. And then when I was in the South and Midwest, I really learned that I also really value diversity. Now, of course, there's a great deal of diverse people everywhere, but I really felt boxed in a lot of ways in those areas as well. What I also really learned from those areas in a beneficial way was that um, I really enjoy the communities there. Like in the Midwest, a lot of times it's getting together and watching games, or getting together and playing games, and those sorts of things, and potlucks together, barbecues, all these things that neighbors were doing. I lived in this amazing place in Columbus where these neighbors just had all these activities they did together, and it was probably one of the best neighborhoods I've ever lived in. And finally coming to California, I would say I really found my happy medium in the sense of, here, the area I'm in, it's like the more weird you are, the better, almost. Like it's really embraced here. And if you're normal, that's kind of looked down upon almost. And that's really when I realized, like, okay, yeah, every area is a little bit different, and you have to find an area that you're most comfortable with. And I think each place that I've been and every person that I've talked to in different areas, there are certain patterns, and I've been able to extract both good and bad things from those areas. And from all those journeys, I've learned that I really, really value being able to be my authentic self without getting comments or, for example, one of the weird things is I walk barefoot. Like if you walk barefoot all over, I don't know, Texas or Illinois or something, people are gonna be like, "What are you doing?" Well, if you're in a beach town in San Diego and you're wearing shoes, people are going to be like, why are you wearing shoes? So it's all these little things for me where just based off how I'm behaving in accordance with being who I really am as a person and seeing how people respond to that, where I was really able to figure out what kind of person, what kind of people I gravitate towards. And I think that's incredibly important because if you don't have the right people in your life, then you're always going to feel aimless and purposeless and like you have no direction in life, and like you don't belong. And a large part of feeling like you belong is having people around you that support you and that accept you for who you really are as a person. Because you're going to know deep down if the friendships you have are inauthentic, if they're based on some like unspoken agreements of this is how you're supposed to behave, this is how you're supposed to act, this is how you're supposed to dress. And I think traveling and living in different places is absolutely the best way of getting in touch with who you are as a person.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. And I think, for us, it's given us appreciation of all those different cultures. Even within the United States, there are different cultures everywhere you go in this country, and I don't think
Yes. Yeah.
everyone understands that. And again, society says, hey, grow up in this place, go to school, plant your roots here, and all that sort of stuff. And I really don't know that
Yes. Yeah.
the way that we should be approaching life. I think the Native Americans might have had it figured out a little bit, to be more of a, nomadic creatures and moving across the land and, that sort of thing. But, I think the other thing that we've seen throughout our travels is, when you get into these different areas and you allow yourself to sit down and actually have conversations with people and learn about them and learn about what makes them tick, is that there's a lot more good in this world than what um, people want to proclaim. If you're watching mainstream media or something like that, they always want to point out the differences and the divisiveness and all that sort of stuff. But if you actually sit down in these different areas and have conversations, I think you're going to find out um, that we all have a lot more in common than what we do different. At the end of the day, like it's really like we
Yeah.
want to be loved, we want to be able
Yeah.
to provide for our family, we want friendships, we want that human connection. Um, as you were traveling, and again, you traveled a little bit differently than we do, where you would actually, drop anchor for a little while and spend time more in that community than what we do currently. But um, you know, what was most surprising to you when you were having those conversations with people in those communities, as far as you know how much we were like, how much we were different, or what was your personal experience?
I would actually completely agree with what you said. I have been completely taken aback by people's kindness and people's compassion when you really reduce the common denominator down to what do we have in common instead of saying what is different between us. Um, like you said, there's a different culture in every state in the US. I almost see them as different countries. And um, I mean, I've lived in two different countries. I've lived in 7 different states. I've lived in dozens of different cities. And there's just people from all over the spectrum everywhere. And yes, of course, like certain areas are going to have certain patterns. But what surprised me most when I interact with people in all these different areas is just how much we all really want the same. It's just how we all may have different habits or actions around it. It might be like two people that want to be physically active. One person might go to the gym and another person might go rock climbing. Like it's really the same goal. It's just a completely different activity. And like the rock climber might not get along with the gym guy at all, but once they start reducing the common denominator down to being active or getting like an adrenaline rush or something. Now you have stuff, that you can find something in common with someone. And I think my biggest discovery about people has been like just how much we all have in common, because like you said, we all just want to be loved. We all want to feel appreciated and heard, and we all want to have a sense of belonging. So if you give your undivided attention to someone and you're genuinely interested in them and you genuinely want to learn about them and figure out common interests, then you're going to be able to do that with pretty much anyone. It doesn't matter what culture they are, what race they are, or what sexuality they are or religion they are. When it really comes down to it, I've learned that I can really connect with anyone. I think you just have to be willing to set aside not just judgment, but also um, like those little pains of getting offended or those little pains of feeling unseen or something, and just being willing or being able to communicate to someone like, hey, this is how I feel when you say this or that that affects me this or that way, and that gives the other person the opportunity to say, well, this is how I meant it, and this is my experience and why I said these certain things. And through that route, you're really going to be able to find out that you can connect with pretty much anyone anywhere on the planet.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so tell me a little bit about the DeBug life. Like, how did that come about? And what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish through that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I've definitely had, I think everyone in life has hardships, but as a child, I definitely had, and throughout my teenage years, I definitely had some very unfortunate events that I had to endure, and as a result, I was very isolated. I'm a pretty equal mix between introvert and extrovert. But by the age of 12, 14-ish, I really don't remember feeling like I had solid friendships. I really don't remember feeling like I belonged anywhere, or like I just had this constant feeling of I was born in the wrong place. I was born in the wrong time. Like I don't belong here. And if you have that as a kid, like during your development, that has a huge impact on your life. So, you know, about 3 4 years ago, like really all I was doing is, I even a few years before that, I started as a junior software developer at Nasdaq, and I worked my way up to a senior developer in like 2 years. So, I worked very hard, and I was at the time smoking a lot of weed as well. And at some point, I really started asking myself, like, okay, you make a $50,000 a year, then you make 100, and it goes up and up and up, and I just started realizing like that this emptiness inside of me wasn't going away with the things I owned or the amount of money I was making. I always had this mindset of, if I have a certain position in life, then I will attract the right people. And that didn't work for me. I was extremely lonely. I had no serious long-term relationships. I had no, as I mentioned earlier, close friends. And I was just feeling really lost in life. I was feeling very isolated, very, very lonely. Like when I woke up, I had this terrible anxiety of, oh, the day's about to start. And then I would keep myself busy all day long. And then in the evenings, I would just feel completely drained. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but it was just this loneliness. I felt this very dreadful emptiness inside of me. And I was wondering, like, well, is there something wrong with my brain? And I did try certain things like antidepressants and such as those, which, as you've mentioned before, for me, really only serve to hide the symptoms rather than attack the root cause of the problem. And then about 2 years or so ago, I started really digging deep through things like journaling. And I mean, I've read hundreds of books and spent tens of thousands of dollars in courses. And kind of through that journey, as well as through therapy and talking to friends, I learned that what I was doing, the goals I was after, which was financial freedom at the time, like I had it all planned out, how much I would need to invest, and passive income streams through real estate and stocks and all these different things, business ownership. I thought that would be my pathway to happiness, because then I'm like, well, if I have all these different income streams, I can just do whatever I want all day. I can go surf, I can read, I can do anything. And through that process, I discovered that all of that is completely meaningless if I don't have anyone to share it with. And, if I don't have friends to share it with, if I don't have people close to me that just make it all worth it, and to rely on when life gets tough, because that happens to all of us. And as I went into that process, started more accepting um, those feelings, because I was raised like, suck it up, buttercup. Like, don't be a sugar cookie. If you have painful feelings, you stuff them deep down and you fix them. You don't complain about them. So the moment I really started opening up about those things and talking to friends and communicating is for me the moment that a lot of things just started changing. And at that point, instead of being exhausted at the end of the day and just dreading like hanging out with people at the end of the day because I didn't have the energy for it, or like some sort of social anxiety, it kind of switched to like, well, I know what my problem is. Like, I know this emptiness I feel is loneliness and not feeling connected, not feeling a community. um, and once I started accepting that, I started being able to show up for other people. Like, if they needed me to be there when they need rides to the airport, if they needed me to be there when they had a tough day, and I would cook a meal for them. Just being like feeling needed was a big was a big change for me, and feeling like I had a community around me. And there was still the part of like, well, okay, great, I have friends and doing these things, but I'm still like tied to not a desk job, but I still have to work for income. Like, I still have to work till I'm what, 50, 60. And I thought to myself, I can't do that. Um, and I could do it, for example, either remotely or part-time, but I'm like, I want to do more with life. Like, I feel like I have somewhat of a sense of belonging now, but I don't feel like I have a purpose. And the more time I spent thinking about that, the more I realized that there's a lot of people like me. I especially talk with a lot of engineers because I'm a software engineer myself, and that group of people tends to really overanalyze things. We tend to think in systems, and we tend to think with logic, and we forget that the root of the brain is emotional. That logic is just really an expression of emotion, or a way to express emotion, really, but that's what we really feel at the core. And I start realizing, well, if I've taken this journey, then I can probably help other people with that journey too. And based off the conversations I was having with people, things I read from, or things I shared from having read from books or having heard from podcasts, or the retreats I went on, I noticed that people were actually genuinely interested in that, and that I always thought it was just me. Like, I thought it was just me struggling with, like, for example, masculinity, right? Like, I've been in a lot of environments, like, for example, in the military or during my childhood, where I have this image of masculinity is, being a strong man, not complaining and getting the work done, and absolutely not talking about your feelings unless they're good, or things like that. And you kind of deal with your own stuff quietly. And I think I just wanted other people to realize that they're not alone in feeling these things. Just like I thought for all these years, like, I realized everyone has these feelings. Every single person on this planet has feelings of loneliness every now and then, has feelings of sadness every now and then. If those things become chronic, they can turn into depression or anxiety, sure. But we all have these same feelings at the root cause, or as a root cause. And once I realized that, um, is really when I started the debug life, and the debug life, and where I started blogging, making videos, and having conversations with people. And I have much more planned for the future, but I would say that's how the debug life got started. Just really having gone through that process myself, and now looking back on who I was a few years ago, and the person I am now, and the person I want to be in the future, and just knowing that there are hundreds of thousands of people out there just like me, that I don't want them to suffer in silence. I want them to know you're not alone. Like, there's other people that are going through this, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, is just understanding that, like you said, there are other people who are dealing with those same, feelings and emotions. And, again, one of the things you touched on was, you know, being a male and masculinity, and
Mm.
how we're raised to be tough and to shake it off and to not show our feelings and not cry and all that sort of stuff. um for your own personal journey, I mean, how tough was it for you to overcome that and understand that truly one of the biggest strengths that we can have is to actually be vulnerable and be strong enough to allow others to see our vulnerability. So what was that journey like for you, coming from that military background and understanding that true strength actually comes through vulnerability?
Wow, that's a powerful sorry, that's a really powerful statement. I completely agree. And also, like, of course, there's something to be said for being tough. And I I would say it was incredibly, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And like um it's not like I sit around and cry all day now, right now, right? Like um I've had multiple near death experiences. I've gone skydiving, I surf, I rock climb, I do all these high adrenaline activities. I jump off of cliffs, I jump off of bridges. Like that to me isn't necessarily masculinity. I'm sure in some ways you could say it is, but like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's really a mixture of both. But for me, when I hear people say like being masculine is about not being vulnerable, essentially is what a lot of people are saying. Like you said, don't cry, don't talk about your feelings. So essentially not being vulnerable. I'm just hearing someone saying is I'm 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 not strong enough to show people who I truly am. So I put on this mask of masculinity so that I'm accepted by society and so that I don't get any attention that I don't feel strong enough to navigate through. So you can do all these activities that I just mentioned, like again, skydiving, uh, going rock climbing, going surfing, all these different things where you legitimately feel like your life's in danger. That is nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what the difficulties I've gone through in embracing vulnerability. And the funny part is, once you learn to accept that, and once you learn to say, I have built up this shell to impress people in society, to really project an image of what I want other people to see. And once you accept that you've done that and it still becomes a daily habit of kind of chipping that away, it does become easier, but accepting that is incredibly difficult. And the hardship that you experience because of that, that's where the true pain lies. Like dating the wrong people or having the wrong friends that may peer pressure you to do activities or substances that you don't want to do. That is where the real pain comes from. And embracing vulnerability is, to answer your question, how difficult was it? It was more difficult than anything I've ever done that legitimately put my life in danger. But it was also the most rewarding thing. And the truth is, unlike doing dangerous activities where you have to prove your manhood, you're not going to die from being vulnerable. It all comes down to like every negative emotion always comes down to fear. If it's like, you dress a certain way to impress people. Well, why do you dress that way? Well, because you want people to think that, you're wealthy and you're sexually attractive. Well, why do you want to be seen as wealthy and sexually attractive? And they're like, well, because I don't want to be alone. And they ask someone, well, why do you not want to be alone? And then they say, really what the answer would be is, well, because for the hundreds of thousands of years that the human species has evolved, if someone was alone, they would die. So my brain is trying to keep me from being alone and trying to keep me to survive. But in this modern day world, all these overstimulations and capitalism out of the wazoo, um, we're receiving all these messages, and it just becomes this confusing mess. Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. And is it something that you're working on a daily basis? I know, because for me, it is something that it's not like you conquer it and you say, okay, I'm going to be
Mhm.
allow myself to be vulnerable, and that's it. Like for me, it's
Mhm.
a daily activity of continuing to, be able to have the strength to show that. Is it the same for you?
Yes, yeah, 100%. It almost I like to think in terms of analogies, and it's almost a little bit like if you want to bench press 225 pounds, you're not going to go to the gym and bench press 225 pounds. You're going to go to the gym, you're going to bench press the bar, and the next week you're going to come back and you're going to do 25 pounds and then 45 pounds. And over the years, you build up to 225 pounds. And as you do that, your body suffers, muscle fibers break down, they tear, and those get rebuilt. It's the exact same with vulnerability. It's something that you don't just switch on and the floodgates open. It's something that you do every single day, and every single day you get a little bit stronger. Those muscles get a little bit stronger, and just like the neural pathways in the brain get a little stronger every time they're used. And if you don't maintain it, then it's something that's also going to an ability that's also going to reduce over time. But it's something that takes tremendous work every single day. But it's also one of the best things you could ever do yourself. Like, do you want to be married to someone that you don't really love? Do you want to be married with someone that you can't really communicate with? Like, just because you have this picture of, oh, this is like the perfect situation that society wants me to have, or do you want to, like, yes, face that pain of having to be vulnerable, but because of that, being able to have really good conversation with people and being able to really find out what sets them on fire in life and what matters to them, and being able to figure out like what kind of people you resonate with and surrounding yourself with those people and creating a meaningful life. So again, thinking in terms of analogies, you can invest in something incredibly safe like bonds, and your returns are going to be lower than inflation. Your money's going to be safe, or you can leave it rotting under the mattress, but it's just going to get eaten away by inflation as well. Or are you going to chase a little bit higher risk investment and get a bigger return? It's also something to be said for, like, if you chase the highest big return investment, like some random crypto coin, now you're just having a big risk of losing all your money. But it really comes down to risk and payoff. If you're not willing to risk anything, you're not going to get paid anything.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And going back to one of the things you said earlier, and I think we see it, so often is, when you were, getting the big paycheck and, living what you thought was, a successful life by society's standards, there was still something missing. And I mean, we see that so often with, celebrity suicides and stuff like that, where, these people are literally at the
Mm-hmm.
top of their game, but yet, there's still something missing in their soul, and they can have millions of
Yes.
dollars in the bank, but yet they still have that loss, that sense of you know, not being able to connect, um, to other humans and that sort of stuff. So I think it's so important for people to understand that, it really doesn't matter, how much money you're making, or, what type of house you have, what type of car you're driving. At the end of the day, you got to find peace within yourself, um, to really find
Yeah.
true happiness. So, man, Mitch, this has been
Yes.
a great conversation. Is there anything that you want to bring up that we might have missed?
I think first of all, I love the conversation. Thank you, Dan. It was these are the kinds of conversations I live for. Yeah, and I would say to people, just as Dan is showing with, he's putting into action, the words he's preaching. But I would say to people, there's nothing wrong with wanting something different than you have now. There's only something wrong with doing something that you don't feel is real or right to who you are as a person. We have definitely been programmed all of our lives to think a certain way. Marketing, everything in our country, everything in our society, especially in Western society, is targeted at changing your brain. So I just want to say, people, take charge of your brain. Like, find the courage to look within you. You're not just going to turn courage on overnight, but you're going to build it one day at a time. Just start asking yourself questions and make sure you get uncomfortable, because if you don't get uncomfortable, you're not going to grow. So listen to podcasts like Dan's and look up resources and figure out a way to slightly push yourself outside your comfort zone just a little every single day. And a year from now, you won't recognize the person that you were a year before.
And the only thing I want to add to that, Mitch, is stressing to people that it's never too late to make that change as well. And I think you can tell by the shade of our beards that I've probably got a couple extra years on you, but yet,
2 or 3.
You're really trying to score some points, but yet, even with myself into my early 50s, being able to make that change and understanding that, we had the big house, we had the big yard, it still was missing, and it was time to sell all that stuff. And throughout our downsizing process was really liberating. So I think people also get stuck into that mentality of, oh, I've been doing this my whole life, it's I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm whatever. It doesn't matter. You can still change. So whether it's in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, it does not matter. You can still make that change and make that shift and say, you know what, I know what society says I should be doing. I'm not going to participate in it anymore. I'm going to get out of the consumer rat race of buying,
Mm-hmm.
and it's time to move on. So kudos to you that you came to that
I
understanding
agree.
before me, and just keep it up for sure. But Mitch, how do people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to see what you're doing with DeBug Life? How do they find you out there on the internet?
Yes, so the best way people can find me is Instagram or TikTok. It'll be the DeBug Life, which is just DEBUG LIFE. And I also have a blog at thedebuglife.com, where I essentially write about everything we just talked about. And it'll fit anyone. I fully agree with you, Dan. Even certain ages have certain advantages to them. Because I think if you're more established, you're going to have a lot more confidence, and you still have societal expectations, but they're going to be pulling on you a lot less than when you're younger. So change, I've seen it myself. I've seen it in my parents, who are incredible people. I've seen it so many times, and I'm convinced that anyone can do it.
Love that. Mitch, that brings me to my final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what's one of the little things that you're doing on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
I try to make people feel seen. I make eye contact. I smile when I want to, and I make sure that they feel heard and seen.
Love that. It's a great answer. And, I think the whole point of that question is people understanding those little things actually translate into big things, to those that you're smiling at, those that you're seeing. So that's a great answer. For those out there listening, you bet. For those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of my most recent book, Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Mitch, I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely.